In 1998, two engineers in a small office in Alviso, on the industrial edge of San Jose, California, filed a patent for something they called a multimedia time warping system, patent number 6,233,389. The names on the filing were Jim Barton and James Yates. The invention described a method for simultaneously recording and playing back a television broadcast, allowing a viewer to pause, rewind, and fast forward through live programming, as though time itself were negotiable. Over the next 15 years, that single patent would generate more than $1,600,000,000 in legal settlements from the largest cable, satellite, and telecommunications companies on Earth. The company that filed it, TiVo, would prove in federal court that it had invented the way Americans watch television. It would win every major case, and in October 2025, 26 years after it shipped its first box, TiVo stopped selling hardware entirely. The company that invented time shifting, that made its own name a verb, that created the exact consumer behavior Netflix would ride to a $200 billion valuation, gave the future away and watched it leave. You're watching Empire Circuit, where we take apart the companies that built the electronic world, down to the circuit board and the engineer who designed it. If that's your kind of story, subscribe and hit like, because TiVo's rise is just as strange as its disappearance. The story starts at Silicon Graphics in the early 1990s. Mike Ramsey was Scottish, born and educated in Edinburgh, an engineer who had crossed the Atlantic to work at Hewlett-Packard, and then climbed to senior vice president at SGI, where he oversaw the platform division, building the workstations that Hollywood used to render dinosaurs for Jurassic Park and liquid metal for Terminator 2. Jim Barton had come from Colorado, a double graduate of the University of Colorado in electrical engineering and computer science, and had passed through Hewlett-Packard and a company called Thinking Machines before landing at SGI. The two men worked on different floors of the same building and shared the same obsession. They looked at the American living room and saw the last space in the house that the digital world had not touched. Music was going digital. Photographs were going digital. But the television set still operated the way it had since the 1950s. A network executive in New York decided what aired and when. 100 million American households arranged their evenings around a grid printed in the TV guide, and if you missed the 8 o'clock show because dinner ran late or the kids would not go to bed, you missed it. There was no rewind. There was no pause. There was a VCR sitting under the television with its clock blinking 12 o'clock because nobody could program it without a manual and a grudge, and even if you managed to set a recording, you got a tape that degraded a little more with every play. Ramsey and Barton believed the hard drive could replace the tape, and that software could replace the schedule. The question was whether anyone would pay for a machine built on that belief. In August 1997, they left SGI and incorporated a company called Teleworld in a rented office in Alviso, a flat, quiet pocket of San Jose, where the rent was cheap and the commute to the rest of Silicon Valley was short. The original concept was a home network server, a box that would manage every digital device in the house. The market was not ready. Nobody in 1997 had enough network devices to justify a server to manage them. So Ramsey and Barton narrowed the idea to its sharpest point. Forget the network. Just fix the television. Let people pause live broadcasts. Let them record without tapes. Let the machine learn what they liked and fill its hard drive while they slept. They renamed the company TiVo, a word Ramsey liked because it was short, had no meaning in any language, and sounded friendly enough to sit on a box next to the family television. They struck a manufacturing partnership with Philips, raised venture capital, and set out to build something that did not have a category yet. The digital video recorder did not exist as a phrase. They would have to invent the product and then invent the language to explain it. They unveiled TiVo at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January 1999, and the response was confusion. Journalists struggled with the concept. A VCR without tapes was the best shorthand most could find. A competitor called Replay TV launched at the same show, and for a brief season, it looked like a two-horse race for a market that might not exist. TiVo shipped its first units on March 31, 1999, manufactured by Philips under the model designation HDR110. 14 hours of recording capacity for $499. 30 hours for $999. On top of the hardware price, TiVo charged $9.95 a month for the program guide service, or a one-time lifetime subscription fee of $199. For a family in 1999, the 30-hour model plus a lifetime subscription cost roughly $1,200. That was a mortgage payment. Sales were slow. The technology was ahead of the vocabulary. But something happened with the people who bought one. They became evangelists. They cornered friends at dinner parties. They demonstrated the pause button with the fervor of a convert. Every TiVo owner had the same story. The first time you pressed pause on live television, walked to the kitchen, came back, and picked up exactly where you left off, something shifted in your understanding of what a television could be. The schedule had been broken. The network no longer owned your evening. You could not go back. On September 30th, 1999, TiVo went public on the NASDAQ at $16 a share. The stock surged. In the fever of the dot-com bubble, TiVo's share price climbed into the mid-70s. The company had fewer than 500,000 subscribers and had never turned a profit. When the bubble burst, the stock cratered. TiVo would spend the next decade fighting for survival in a market it had created and could not control. The subscriber numbers grew, slowly, painfully, one converted household at a time. TiVo burned through cash. Profitability remained somewhere beyond the next quarter, always promised and never delivered. The company laid off employees, cut costs, and kept building. The pivot that defined TiVo was not a product launch or a pricing change. It was a behavior that nobody at the company had fully anticipated. TiVo owners began recording entire seasons of television shows using a feature called Season Pass, which automatically captured every episode of a series without the viewer lifting a finger. They watched these episodes back to back, in sequence, on their own schedule. The peanut-shaped remote, that distinctive kidney bean curve that fit naturally in the hand, had two buttons that no other remote in America carried: a green thumbs up and a red thumbs down. Press thumbs up on a show you liked, thumbs down on one you didn't, and TiVo's software began learning your taste. It filled your hard drive with programs it predicted you would enjoy, a recommendation algorithm running quietly in a set-top box, years before Netflix would build its empire on the same principle. There was a hidden feature too, an Easter egg code entered on the remote that activated a 30-second skip button, letting users leap past commercials with surgical precision. TiVo had built a machine that let viewers watch what they wanted, when they wanted, without advertisements. This was binge-watching before the word existed. And every cable executive and network advertiser in America was paying attention, though not in the way TiVo hoped. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 had consolidated the American cable industry into a handful of giants, and those giants controlled the one thing TiVo could not: the set-top box already sitting in every living room. TiVo required customers to buy a separate piece of hardware and pay a separate monthly fee. The cable companies realized they could build DVR functionality, not as elegant as TiVo's but functional enough, directly into their own boxes and fold the cost into the cable bill. No extra purchase, no second remote, no separate subscription. The convenience gap was lethal. On February 1, 2004, during the Super Bowl halftime show, Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction became the most replayed moment in TiVo's history, a data point the company itself reported. Every network executive in the country understood in that instant that the American audience now had a rewind button, and that the rewind button was a threat to the entire economic model of broadcast television. The more TiVo proved that viewers wanted to control their own schedule, the more urgently the cable industry needed to own that control itself. TiVo had handed its enemies both the blueprint and the motivation. By 2006, TiVo was a verb. Did you TiVo it? Entered the American language alongside Google it and Xerox it, that rare achievement where a brand name dissolves into a common action. The company reached roughly 3 million total subscriptions, and the brand recognition was enormous, far outstripping the actual installed base. The TiVo community forum ran thousands of threads filled with users who called themselves TiVo addicts, who bought lifetime subscriptions the way a homeowner buys a deed, who treated their boxes with an affection normally reserved for family pets. They named them. They grieved when a hard drive failed. They swapped tips on upgrading storage and extending the life of machines that the rest of the electronics industry considered disposable. The Philips HDR-110, that first box from 1999, had earned a kind of reverence. The moment you picked up the peanut remote for the first time, felt its curve in your palm, and pressed pause on a live football game to answer the door, you understood that television had changed, and it was never going back. $499 in 1999 money, roughly $850 today, for a machine that carried 14 hours of programming on a hard drive the size of a paperback novel. The Series 3, launched in 2006, was TiVo's masterpiece. $799 for high-definition recording with cable card support and dual tuners. It was, by every engineering measure, the finest DVR ever built. It was also a warning. $800 for a standalone box when Comcast was bundling good enough DVR service into an existing cable bill for $10 a month was a luxury the mass market would never accept. The TiVo Romeo arrived in 2013 with 6 tuners, up to 3 terabytes of storage, and the ability to stream recordings to a phone. It could do everything. It arrived the same year Netflix released House of Cards, the show that dropped an entire season at once and proved you did not need a DVR at all if the content simply appeared on your screen at midnight, waiting for you, already knowing what you liked. The Romeo was a perfect machine for a war that had already been decided. TiVo had taught Americans to binge. Netflix had learned the lesson better than the teacher. But TiVo had a weapon the cable companies had not expected. In that 1998 patent filing, Jim Barton and James Yates had described, in the precise and unforgiving language of patent law, the fundamental mechanism by which any digital video recorder worked. U.S. Patent 6,233,389 covered the simultaneous storage and playback of a broadcast signal, the act of writing to a hard drive and reading from it at the same time so that a viewer could pause and rewind live television. Every cable company DVR in America infringed it. Every satellite provider's box infringed it. In 2004, TiVo sued EchoStar, the parent company of Dish Network. The case went to trial in Marshall, Texas. In 2006, a jury awarded TiVo $74 million. Barton is remembered as co-founder and chief technology officer. James Yates, the engineer whose name sits beside Barton's on the patent that would generate more revenue than every TiVo box ever sold combined, is virtually unknown. That patent became TiVo's most valuable asset. In 2011, Dish Network and EchoStar settled for $500 million. AT&T paid $215 million, Verizon paid $250 million, Cisco and Google, together, paid $490 million. Samsung settled. The total patent revenue crossed $1,600 million. TiVo was earning more from suing the companies that copied its invention than from selling DVRs to the people who loved it. You can read that story 2 ways, and honest history holds both readings at once. One reading is vindication. TiVo built something original, proved it in court, and collected what it was owed. The other reading is a diagnosis. When a company's largest revenue line is litigation, the product has already lost. While TiVo spent a decade in courtrooms, Netflix launched its streaming service in 2007 and quietly began proving TiVo's thesis on a scale TiVo could never reach. Viewers wanted control. They wanted to watch on their own schedule. They wanted the machine to learn their taste. Netflix took every insight TiVo had pioneered, stripped away the hardware, stripped away the antenna and the cable card and the hard drive, and delivered it as software over the internet to any screen in the house. The DVR was not defeated by a better DVR. It was defeated by the elimination of the need to record anything at all. TiVo had spent a decade proving in courtrooms that it owned the concept of time-shifted television. Netflix made the concept so universal that owning it was like owning the patent on breathing. In April 2016, a company called Rovi, a patent licensing firm most consumers had never heard of, announced it would acquire TiVo for $1.1 billion, roughly $10.70 per share. 16 years earlier, that same stock had traded in the mid-70s. The combined company took the TiVo name because Rovi understood that the brand still carried weight even though the product no longer carried the market. The new TiVo Corporation was a patent licensing operation wearing the skin of a consumer electronics legend. In 2019, TiVo Corporation merged with Xperi, yet another technology licensing firm, in a deal valued at approximately $3 billion. Xperi split into two companies in 2022. The TiVo name bounced between corporate shells like a deed traded at auction. In October 2025, TiVo stopped selling DVR hardware after 26 years. The Philips HDR 110 had shipped in March 1999 from that office in Alviso. The last TiVo box sold a quarter-century later into a world that had moved so far beyond it that the product barely registered as news. A company whose patents earned over $1.6 billion, whose brand became a verb in the American language, sold for $1.1 billion to a licensing firm, and was folded into a corporate structure designed to extract revenue from intellectual property while the product line quietly disappeared. The engineers who had built the original TiVo software scattered across Silicon Valley, carrying the knowledge of what they had made into companies that would never credit them. The sign came off the building in Alviso. The building stopped mattering. But the boxes are still out there. The TiVo community forum is still active, filled with users running Series 2 and Series 3 units that have been recording television for close to 2 decades. Lifetime subscription units with working hard drives sell on eBay to collectors and holdouts who refuse to let go. The Peanut remote, that kidney bean shape with its green thumbs up and red thumbs down, sits in desk drawers and display cases across America, held by people who remember the night they first pressed pause on live television and felt the rules of their living room change. The recommendation algorithm TiVo built, the one that watched what you watched and learned what you liked, is the ancestor of every suggested for you row on every streaming platform on Earth. Netflix's recommendation engine, the system that by some estimates drives more than 70% of viewer choices, is a direct descendant of the logic Jim Barton and James Yates put into that 1998 patent filing. TiVo's ideas live inside every smart television in America. The pause button, the recommendation row, the assumption that you, not the programmer, decide when the show begins. Its name is on none of them. The Peanut remote. In 1999, it fit in your hand, and it changed everything about how a family watched television. A green thumb, a red thumb, and a pause button that stopped time. Today, it is a relic, and the idea it carried, that the viewer and not the network decides what plays and when, is so completely embedded in how the world consumes entertainment that no one remembers who proved it first. TiVo did not lose the war for television. TiVo won every battle, collected every patent check, and then watched the war move to a battlefield where patents did not matter. If you owned a TiVo, drop a comment below. Tell us the model, the year, and whether it still works. The people who use these machines know more about what was lost than the people who sold it. Subscribe to Empire Circuit. We are building the archive of every American tech company that changed the world, and what it cost them. We have the story of another California company coming next, and you will not want to miss how it ends.